the Department of Justice is dropping criminal charges against former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who admitted to lying to federal investigators. Meanwhile, Roger Stone could spend 9 years in prison for a similar crime, lying to Congress. Does any of that seem fair to you? It shouldn't. Apparently, there is still a two-tiered system of justice in Washington, D.C., where Trump supporters are punished and resistance members tend to walk. And they don't just go free. They are handed lucrative gigs on television to play victim to a pliant crowd.
We don't expect to live in a country where the perceived political enemies of the president suddenly become the subjects of criminal investigations in a pursuit to, to throw political enemies in jail. That is an absolute abrogation of everything we know and expect from our system of justice here as Americans, and it's disturbing to see the Department of Justice playing a role in that politicization of the work that DOJ should be doing.
What you just heard aren't the words of someone just indicted. They are from someone who was just let off the hook. Are Americans really supposed to feel sorry for him? Joining me now is Robert Driscoll, former Department of Justice official, and Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. You follow these things closely. Let me say at the onset, I got to tell you, Bill Barr is the best thing to happen in the Trump administration. He is a muckraker. I think he has his hands full. And if Andrew McCabe thinks that he is free, scot clear, and all gone and no more worries, I think he has another thing coming. But, Robert, I want to start with you. It does feel to people like, when are we actually going to prosecute somebody who admits to lying to federal officers? And as the former acting director of the FBI, this guy knew better.
Right. He did, and he admitted that he wasn't truthful with investigators from the IG's office and internally at DOJ. I think that this is a great example, though, of why I think Bill Barr is right to take a close look at these things and be involved. Is you're going to take the political heat for these decisions one way or the other, and that's the whole point. Is the Attorney General works for the President, the Attorney General runs the Department of Justice, they all report to him, and so you make these calls. Some of them from the outside appear, questionable to some of us who have looked at it from the outside, not having looked at the file. But McCabe is it's amazing. It's like the talking points didn't change when the charges were dropped. You look at what he says, and there would have been the same talking points had he been indicted. And then he actually got, from his perspective, what would be a fair shot, and it doesn't stop him from complaining that somehow the system was unfair because they even considered bringing charges when he, in fact, admitted to lying to investigators.
You're the president of Judicial Watch. You've been watching the Justice Department here. Is there going to be a two-tiered system, or are we actually going to have justice at some point?
Well, in my view, past experience is an indication of what's going to happen. Comey was referred to the Justice Department under the Attorney General Barr for prosecution for leaking the president's FBI files, lying about it, including classified information. They refused to proceed. You have the significant criminal activity by the deputy FBI director referred to the IG, to the Attorney General. They've refused to proceed. I'm hopeful that he tries to get control of the Justice Department. Judicial Watch is facing opposition from the Justice Department and getting accountability, even through the simple FOIA process. It's troubling. And the Attorney General has got to understand it ain't regular business at the Justice Department. This week began with a slap at the Attorney General, an attack on the president through this abusive Stone, and it ended, frankly, with another slap and attack at the president and the Attorney General. And if he thinks he's being well served by the careerists around him, he needs to take another look at who's advising him. Because you know the way it works. These folks pretend to be nonpartisan. The Justice Department is full of Democrat activist lawyers pretending to be career civil servants who are pursuing an agenda. There are thousands of Vindmans, thousands of James Comeys, and they're not working for you and I.
There are 110,000 people at the Department of Justice. This is why it's concerning. When former acting Attorney General Sally Yates signed one of the fraudulent FISA warrants against Carter Page, and now she's writing stuff like this for the Washington Post. Quote, Department of Justice independence is essential to our nation's promise of impartial justice. It's not a tool for POTUS to use for retribution or camouflage, end quote. I mean, this is Sally Yates. She's in a responsible position, but the President of the United States is still the constitutional officer in charge of the executive branch.
Well, it's also the height of irony for her to make that statement when she was involved at the tail end of the Obama administration, heading as a holdover to Trump, kind of approving some of the things that went on and working with Brennan and others in order to get the whole Russia collusion story started. So she's not the right person to be making that statement. But the reality is these people are constitutional officers of the United States. The Attorney General works for the President, and he controls the department. And that's the thing. You look at all these cases, the voters will hold the President and the Attorney General accountable for what happens, and so they have every right to be involved at a broad level to make sure things are done appropriately.
Because they can't be out there rogue. And that's why you mentioned Brennan, and I think one of the people that Durham is actually looking at, because it goes above and beyond outside of this, is what Mr. Brennan has said previously. Watch this.
I think it's kind of silly. I'm certainly willing to talk to Mr. Durham or anybody else who has any questions about what we did during this period of time in 2016. And so I don't know what I have not talked to him yet. It clearly, I think, is another indication that Donald Trump is using the Department of Justice to go after his enemies in any way that he can.
I think this guy is scared, and I think there's reason for him to be scared, and I think that this is just my own personal opinion, but part of the reason it transitioned from an investigation to a criminal probe is potentially because of people like Brennan and what they may or may not have done.
Well, I think they're all very nervous about the possibility of prosecutions. I'm not seeing evidence they should be nervous. Durham is doing a glorified IG investigation, and Brennan's kind of right. He's asking questions about his decision-making on how to deploy intelligence assets. He ain't going to be prosecuted over that. He might be criticized in a report. So I'm not seeing indications. You know what a real criminal investigation looks like. I'm not seeing any of that out of this Justice Department on the worst corruption scandal in American history, illegal spying on a sitting president. The president's right to be frustrated. He should be tweeting more and directing the Justice Department more on this. I'd appoint a special counsel directly if I were him. Justice Department is incapable of doing this in these present circumstances.
Well, and I think part of the concern here is that you may not win the case, but at least make the case. And that's been my frustration, is within the Department of Justice, if you see wrongdoing, even when in the Oversight Committee, when I was the chair, we'd make criminal referrals and it would be bipartisan. The Department of Justice still wouldn't go after one of their own. But I got to tell you, I still have my belief level on Attorney General Barr is off the charts. And I do think that these people still have a lot to worry about, because I do believe that Durham is a strong prosecutor and that he will get to the truth. Real quickly, I've only got seconds left.
Just to defend Barr a little bit on the tweeting, I think it doesn't help him when the president tweets about a particular case. I think that hurts him because it sets up the narrative for the left that Barr is doing it at the direction of the
when the president tweets after this recommendation comes out, I think he has every right to do that. And I want a president, when he sees something that is wrong and he thinks it's a miscarriage of justice, to speak out about it. So, gentlemen, thank you. This is not the end of this. There's going to be a lot more about this.